Repositioning cruises are some of the best cruise deals out there. Or are they? What the cruise lines don't tell us is that there are 11 things that can make you wish you never booked that repositioning cruise. Number 10 alone can take that awesome $35 a night deal and turn it into a real financial headache. But I've been on many repositioning cruises, and I'm going to tell you how to avoid every one of these mistakes so that you can take advantage of that great repositioning cruise deal you found and have a cruise of a lifetime. I'm Gary with Optimal Cruising, bringing you the cruise insider information you need to avoid mistakes, save money, and protect yourself so that you'll have your best cruise ever. Some of my favorite repositioning cruises are transatlantic cruises, but there is a trap. As soon as you book that great deal, now you have to book in airfare either back home or to Europe and then take the cruise back home. Typically in the springtime, you're going to find these cruises going from the US or the Caribbean to Europe. And in the fall, typically you're going to find them going back the other way. But if you don't consider the cost of that airfare, you're not really looking at the whole cost of this trip. Now, when I do a repositioning cruise, it's not just to do the cruise. If I'm taking a cruise that's ending up in Civitavecchia or Rome in Italy, I'm going to spend a week in Italy. I'm going to see some sights there as part of this. And so that repositioning cruise that's getting me over there is saving me the airfare of going in that direction. But before you book that repositioning cruise, make sure you check the price of the flight to either get there or get back home, because you can find 14-night repositioning cruises for around $650 per person. Yet that airfare to get you there or to get you back might be another $600. And then before you put the money down on that repositioning cruise, you want to check out this next thing. There are a variety of repositioning cruises out there. I recently did one from Port Canaveral to Barcelona. It had several stops off the coast of Spain along the way, including one in Palma de Mallorca, which is a pretty famous stop. I've been on other transatlantic cruises that stopped in Tangiers, in Cape Verde, in some unique places in the Azores that you're not usually going to get on a typical European or Mediterranean cruise. Itineraries are really important on repositioning cruises because they go to unique ports, and you're going to have so many sea days that almost nobody just wants to skip the port like you might in a Caribbean cruise. If you've been to Costa Maya so many times, I mean, how many times are you going to get off the ship there? So some people stay on the ship at some of these ports and just enjoy the facilities. But on a transatlantic or a long repositioning cruise, you have so many days at sea that at these ports, they're really the destination you're looking forward to. So know ahead of time what those are. Make sure they're places you want to see, or find a different itinerary because they do vary widely. And I've spoken to a lot of cruisers who didn't anticipate this next thing, and it kind of ruined their trip. A good friend of mine recently did a repositioning cruise from Rio de Janeiro to Barcelona. And he said he completely regretted it. He flew down to Rio to board a ship that had been doing cruises in Brazil for some time, and they were repositioning that ship over to Europe. When he got on board, he realized that 80 to 90% of the passengers were Brazilian, speaking Portuguese. That was the dominant language throughout the cruise. Even the cruise director and everybody else, their first go-to with announcements and everything else was Portuguese. He said that there were Spanish speakers on there as well, but hardly any English speakers. Now, he was used to only taking cruises from U.S. ports. And to be frank, most of us are, right? We cruise from Miami, from Galveston, from Los Angeles, from a lot of different cities in the U.S. However, if you're not used to taking cruises from a foreign country, those repositioning cruises are going to be very different than the kind of cruise you're used to. And this would be true for a lot of transatlantic sailings leaving from more obscure ports like Guadalupe. A lot of locals in these smaller Caribbean islands use these transatlantic sailings to get their families to Europe because it's a lot cheaper than buying everybody an airline ticket. And think about it like this. If the audience on the cruise is primarily Brazilian, let's say, the food, the dancing, the entertainment is all going to be skewed towards Brazilians, not towards Americans or English speakers. Now, that might not be a bad thing. Some people like to get immersed in other cultures, but know this going ahead. If you just want the same kind of similar cruising experience that you have when you do a Caribbean cruise or an Alaska cruise, book it out of a U.S. port or from a foreign country that's returning to a U.S. port. Would you prefer to be on a ship with a more American feel, or do you like to be immersed in a different culture? Let me know in the comments below. One thing that really bothers me is I'm getting on a cruise and there always seems to be somebody else in line boarding that same cruise who has a heavy cough or other signs of illness, and they're just boarding that ship anyway. But on a 3, 4, even 7-night cruise, it takes some time for that to get around the ship. And I'm pretty careful. I use hand sanitizer. I wash my hands frequently. I even take extra vitamin C anytime I'm going on a cruise ship environment. I've got links to all the things I use in my Amazon store in the description if you want to check them out. They tend to keep me more healthy, but I will warn you that on these longer cruises that I've been on, sometimes I can't even avoid it, because in the beginning of a 14-night cruise, you might see a few people in the buffet area or in the dining room with a nasty cough. But by the end of 10 or 12 days, it seems like it has spread to everyone. And I admit I've gotten sick this way myself. I'm not even talking about the norovirus here. I'm talking about the common cold or the flu. They seem to spread like wildfire in these confined environments, especially when you have a week of sea days in a row, nobody's getting off the ship, and nobody likes to be confined in their room for the entire cruise, so you're always out and about amongst the other people. So just be more vigilant when you do a repositioning cruise that is a longer one. You want to make sure always to be washing your hands before you eat. Be careful about touching your face at any time during the cruise, because that's really one of the big ways that these things can spread. And while these are just minor illnesses, this next thing I'm going to get to could really kill your great cruise deal. But speaking of deals, if you're thinking of booking a cruise, we maintain a list of the best cruise deals you can book right now. Just comment deals or click on the deals link in our description and I'll email it to you. Most of us don't like to think about medical emergencies when you're on vacation, but they do happen. In fact, 2 of the repositioning cruises that I've been on in the past 18 months had medevacs from the middle of the ocean. These things are not cheap. And if you come down with something or you have a condition that you need to be taken off that ship, it can cost you well up to $50,000 or more. And this kind of thing is not covered by the typical health insurance that we have back home. And the travel insurance will also cover you for any illnesses or accidents that you have at a port of call, or maybe in Europe, for example, if you're going to spend some time in a place like Europe before or after your cruise, and you won't have to worry about how you're going to handle those bills if something unexpected happens. After doing many repositioning cruises, I found out that when you book the cruise, where you book the cruise, and even where you select your cabin on the ship can make a big difference in your overall experience. A lot of transatlantic cruises, for example, are run in February, but they typically go through May. Well, you're going to have a big difference in weather from February to May. In February, if you're starting out of Miami, it's going to be nice and warm, but a day or two at sea and you're going to have cold weather most of the way, and it's still going to be cool and probably more rainy once you get to where you're going in Europe. If you cruise that same route in April or May, the weather tends to be a little bit better. And if you're going the other direction from Europe to the US, you have the hurricane season to deal with, so the weather is iffy. Cruises that cross the Pacific tend to have slightly better weather, but they're also a little more exotic and there aren't as many of them. And then there are cruises like the Panama Canal cruises that reposition from Seattle to Florida or vice versa. And those you're gonna be mostly having decent weather, except when you get up into the Northwest. And most cruisers who've done transatlantic cruises agree that it matters what side of the ship your balcony is on if you're booking a balcony cabin. And that is because when you're going one direction like that, the sun is going to be on one side of the ship most of the cruise. So if you are taking a transatlantic cruise from the US to Europe, that sun is mostly going to be shining on the right side of the ship because that's the side that's going to be facing towards the south for the majority of the cruise. Some people like that for these cruises because it tends to warm things up on a cruise that gets a little cooler. What do you prefer when you get a balcony cabin? Seeing the sun all the time or being shielded from it? Let me know in the comments below. I had at least 20-25 cruises under my belt before I took my first repositioning cruise. And that's important because you have to know that you really like cruising when you book a repositioning cruise. These tend to be longer cruises, at least 12, 13, some are 17, 25 days. Are you going to want to be on the ship that long, which includes usually a week or more of straight sea days as you're crossing one of the big oceans? If you're new to cruising, I highly recommend taking a shorter cruise first. If you're a little unsure, try a 3 or 4 day cruise or a 7-day cruise. They're usually pretty quick. You're getting off at a lot of ports, and by the time you've done that, you'll have an idea if you really like the cruise ship experience enough to do a repositioning cruise. Some people just like constantly hitting ports. For example, I have a friend who loves doing a cruise of the Greek Isles because there are no sea days on some of those cruises. Every day is another island, and that's great. But he doesn't like to be on the ship that much, so he would never book a repositioning cruise where he has multiple sea days in a row. And for my friend, it doesn't really matter what kind of ship he's on because he's there for the destination. But when you're doing a repositioning cruise, it can matter. Some of these cruise ships are older, smaller ships with not a whole lot going on. I did a cruise once on an MSC ship that basically just had a pool deck with 2 pools and a kids pool area, and that was all the activity the ship had. There are a lot of larger ships doing repositioning cruises, so if you like a lot of activities like an ice rink, a bowling alley, things like that to do, then you want to look for a ship that has those activities on board. If you prefer a much more quiet experience, then the smaller ship might be the right choice for you because you're really going to be in the middle of the ocean with not a whole lot to do except relax. And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking they're going to get the same high caliber or quality of entertainment on these repositioning cruises, and that's usually not the case. When you're on a Caribbean cruise that's doing a loop every week or every 3 or 4 days, they're bringing on and off entertainers all the time, comedians, magicians, jugglers, all kinds of people to put on decent shows. On repositioning cruises, it's mostly in-house talent. It's too expensive for the cruise lines to bring on professional entertainers when they have to bring them on such a long cruise because they have to pay them for that time. And then they have to pay to fly them back overseas. And when you're narrowing down which ship you want to go on, you want to check the status of this next thing. If you've been cruising for a while, you know that ships go into dry dock from time to time. It's a routine process where they get refurbished. And a lot of times, a cruise will do a repositioning cruise to get that ship into dry dock. Well, if you happen to be on that cruise, just understand that that ship is going to be older. It's going to be needing updates, needing repairs. That's why it's going into dry dock. It doesn't mean you won't have a great cruise, but it might not be as fresh of a ship as one that's just being moved to take passengers in another part of the world. Or sometimes you can catch a repositioning cruise out of dry dock, which means it's been freshly refurbished. A lot of cruisers tell me that those are great experiences because they get to test out all the new things that were put on. Maybe the rooms have been updated or remodeled, and they have a great time on what feels like a pretty new ship. Next, I'm going to tell you about one thing that can really turn a good repositioning cruise deal into a financial headache. But first, if you would take a minute and subscribe to our channel, hit that like button. It helps us grow and will continue to bring you cruise insider information. My parents recently took a trip to Europe and I convinced them to book a repositioning cruise to get there. And they got a great deal, $35 a night. But by the time that cruise was over, they spent more than double the cruise fare on board. And this is a boredom spending trap that gets a lot of repositioning cruisers because you're at sea for days on end. And yes, everything's included, the food, the basic drinks, water, and juice. Most people aren't going to buy a drink package for a 14-night cruise because the price is absolutely ridiculous and you're probably better off a la carte. But my parents were on vacation. They were thinking, we order a few drinks here and there. We play a little bit in the casino. My mom did a spa a couple of nights during the cruise, and it all started to add up. So when you're on a shorter cruise, like maybe a 7-night Caribbean cruise, and you're getting off at a port on 4 of those days, you're not really getting bored. And so you always have something to do. It's keeping you occupied. When you're on a long repositioning cruise, sometimes that boredom sets in and people start to spend money. So you have to watch out for that. I'm pretty strict with myself. If I book a great cruise deal, especially on a repositioning cruise, I don't want to give the cruise line extra money that erodes away that deal. So I stick with the budget and I bring things on board that are going to keep me entertained. I download all kinds of movies onto my iPad. I bring in drink flavors so that I can add them to water so I don't get bored of just having water every day. I don't want to fall into the trap of, well, I'll buy a few extra sodas, I'll buy a few more things, because they add up fast. One of the nice things that you will notice on repositioning cruises, though, is the drink specials tend to be pretty good. And that's because not as many people are buying that drink package. So if you like to have a drink or two, you probably can find a time to buy it when you're not paying full price. I've seen all kinds of specials on these cruises, everything from 2-for-1 drinks to happy hour to half-price drinks on one day. They even had a couple days where they offered a 2-for-1 all-you-can-drink package. So basically, you could get you and your wife an unlimited drink package for one day and it costs you maybe $60. That's not a bad deal if you like to drink a little alcohol now and then. One thing I actually like about repositioning cruises that go over many time zones is that the time change happens gradually. It's not like if you book a flight from Miami to Rome and all of a sudden you lost 6 hours. If you book a cruise from Miami to Civitavecchia, you're losing an hour every other day basically until you get there. And you have a lot of time to adjust to that time change. Now, some people think that's kind of like a whiplash because you just lost an hour and the next day you lose another hour. And that's true, but it is a reality of those types of cruises. And a lot of repositioning cruises prefer to go from east to west because in that direction you gain an hour every day. But it's still an advantage over flying, however you look at it, because once you arrive at that port, you're well adjusted. So now that you're ready to book a repositioning cruise, there are several things that many passengers regret not doing the first day of their cruise, especially on a longer cruise. I'll tell you what those are right here.